Welcome everyone to the War Hunt Quarterly Market Update for March 2025. My name is Bianca Musico. I'm the Head of Advice at War Hunt and I'm joined with Steve Garth today.
Great. Hi, Bianca, and congratulations on being the CFP Financial Advisor of the Year. That is a great honour.
Thank you. It was a great honour to be presented that back in November last year, but I couldn't have done it without War Hunt or our clients. So it was a great honour. Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
Now we're here to talk about the last quarter and markets and what's been happening. So where would you like to start? Should we start with international markets?
Well, I think we should start with the US, because when you think of the quarter, Bianca, it's all about Trump, tariffs and trade wars. Led to tumultuous times, if you want to really play on the T's. But it's kind of like shot yourself in the foot, because it's really affected the US market more than any other market. When you see the chart here, normally we would just show the S&P 500 index. I think that's what people are familiar with the American market. But they may not know it's actually made up of two separate exchanges. One exchange is called the NASDAQ, and that's where those big high-tech stocks that we hear about, Apple, Google, Nvidia, they reside there. But the other half of the S&P 500 is on the New York Stock Exchange, and that's where the older industrial companies lie. And so when you see the chart here, you can see they've had two quite different paths. The NYSE done pretty well. It's up about 2% for the quarter. And you look at the NASDAQ, and while that had a stunning 12-month return, it's really come off. It's down by 10% for the quarter. That's what they call a market correction.
And what are they saying has caused that market correction? Is it a number of stocks in particular?
Yeah, it's really sort of got to do almost with one stock in particular. Big company, which I don't think people had heard of 2 years ago, called Nvidia. It's now like the largest, or at least one of the largest companies in the world and on the US market. Nvidia makes AI chips, and it's been on a run. It returned 180% last year. This quarter, you can see it's down by 20%. Now, some of that's due to the market that we've just talked about, but it's also got to do with a competitor AI chip that's come along from China called DeepSeek. And this AI chip turns out to be faster, cheaper, and more efficient than what Nvidia's doing. And so the market's suddenly gone, ooh, have we been too enthusiastic about the share price for Nvidia? Do we need to rethink it?
So with that happening over in the US, what's happening with the rest of the world?
So in the rest of the world, it's always a different story. When you see the chart here, you can see that's down a little bit for the quarter. That's really because the US make up 70% of that index. And so if the US is having a bad quarter, guess what? The world index is going to suffer a little bit as well. But other big markets like Europe, that's up 10% for the quarter. It's doing really well. You'll note that Australia's negative, but it's such a small part of the index, it doesn't really move it. And the emerging markets are positive as well. So it's really the US that's been dragging down the overall market.
So is there anything specifically within the Aussie markets that we want to touch on in this quarter?
Strangely, there's nothing specific, if you like. We are having very slow growth in Australia. Up to February, the market was hitting new highs, fantastic. And then the Reserve Bank gave a 25 basis point cut. You would have thought, woohoo, happy days, interest rates are coming down. But in fact, the reason for the 25 basis point cut rate was because the economy is slowing. It's growing at its slowest pace in decades.
Now, we're getting a lot of questions at the moment around the Reserve Bank interest rates, and they've just recently put them on hold again, is my understanding. Is there anything that you want to fill us in on that part?
And the US, the Federal Reserve over there 2 weeks ago, had their meeting, and they also left rates on hold. So here's the thing about tariffs. If everything Trump says, and he was to carry through with, it's actually quite inflationary. It's going to add to inflation. So in that case, central banks have to raise rates, which is what we saw a few years ago when inflation's here. But when economies are slowing, central banks want to cut rates to get the economy moving. So we're in this situation at the moment where central banks are sort of stuck in the middle between potential inflation. It's not quite low enough for them yet, and also a slowing economy. So they're both the Reserve Bank of Australia and the Federal Reserve are in very much wait and see.
Well, thank you, Steve. That was a pretty good summary of what's happened over the last quarter, both internationally and here in Australia. So if you have any other questions, though, please feel free to reach out to your advisors at War Hunt. I'm sure they'll be able to fill you in a bit more on the details of what's happened in the last quarter. But thank you for having us.
Terrific. Thank you.